From the Joy News Center. This is News at 8.
This is a primetime news bulletin here on Joy News on Multi TV, also available across Europe on London-based ABN Television. In this edition, stock of supplies lost in Central Medical Stores Inferno estimated to be worth over 230 million Ghana cedis. But health authorities say steps are being taken to limit its adverse impact on health service delivery. Meanwhile, the Ghana National Fire Service is yet to completely douse the fire more than a day after it started. Ghana Medical Association cautions government about delays in firming up conditions of service for doctors, warning it will be forced to take some drastic actions. National Democratic Congress refused suggestions of government's complicity in Nayeli cocaine scandal and rather accuses the new Patriotic Party of incubating the drug baroness's activities during their tenure in government. Africa Center for Energy Policy kicks against government's plans to introduce a fuel mitigation levy. In business, inflation for December 2014 remains unchanged from the previous month's figure. We also have sports, showbiz and international news. Do stay tuned.
News at 8 with Israel Lai.
Right, residents of Wa have again questioned the preparedness of authorities at the Wa Regional Hospital to rein in a possible outbreak of the deadly Ebola disease. This was after a makeshift structure constructed mid-last year to quarantine suspected Ebola patients was abandoned and overtaken by weeds and pests. Authorities at the hospital say a new center has been set up at the fevers unit, but residents are unhappy. Rafik Salam's report from Wa.
In their desperate attempt to cover up the reports carried by Joy News on the makeshift structure constructed to quarantine Ebola-infected persons in case of an outbreak in the Upper West region, authorities at the Wa Regional Hospital have further angered residents. A press conference held on behalf of the hospital by the Health Services Administrator, Eric Dakra, stated the makeshift structure, which is now entirely covered by dust, cobwebs and fecal matter of lizards, was abandoned by the hospital and relocated to the hospital's fevers unit.
Before the visit of the Honorable Regional Minister of Health to the Upper West region, management of this hospital relocated the site, the temporal site, to the fevers unit that we describe as the isolation unit. But upon a series of discussions and consultation, that we moved the site to that place temporarily. If there were any case, we would have managed the case at the fevers unit.
The statement from Eric Dakra did not go down well, with some residents here and tongues have already begun wagging. They wondered why a deadly disease like Ebola could have its patients under one roof and lied with people who have cholera and tuberculosis. Yusuf Kanton and Abdullahi Salifu, residents of Wa, expressed concern about the center lamped with a fevers unit and also located at the middle of the hospital rounds.
It's something that we should still consider reviewing, because the fevers unit, as you all know, usually is a place that has a certain kind of stigma, and we are also told that the Ebola disease is a disease that comes along with the stigma. So when you start from that point of view, it stands to reason that persons who are infected are most likely to resist being quarantined in those kind of facilities.
We are lumping Ebola with the fevers unit. We are indirectly telling people that if you have any sickness that that will send me to the fevers unit is indirectly equivalent to Ebola. It saddens me as a resident. If indeed this is happening at our regional hospital, what about our district hospitals? This tells us that we are seriously not prepared for Ebola should in case we have an outbreak. And indeed, looking at this in the way the people of Upper World live, and the way we treat our sick, and the way we treat our dead, should we have Ebola in Upper West region, I bet you within some few minutes, most people are going to be infected.
The DO called on the hospital authorities to review their decision and speed up the process of building a permanent holding center. A visit to the fevers unit and precisely to the 2 wards earmarked for Ebola patients, should it break in the region, revealed an empty ward with only 4 beds, and all are without bed sheets. Rafiq Salam's report from WA for Joy News.
It's okay. Officers of the National Fire Service are having to fight the inferno at the central medical stores all over again, more than 30 hours after the fire started. This is because the attempt to control the blaze has been fraught with several challenges, amongst them shortage of water, the severe harmattan, as well as logistics. Joy News' Kwabna Chenchehine Boating, who's been monitoring the firefight all day, has just joined me in the studio with the very latest. Right, good evening to you, Kwabna. Tell us about the challenges that the firemen have been facing in trying to control the blaze.
Well, the main problem was initially they were told it wasn't access, but later on we realized they had some challenge getting access to the main facility because the fire actually was behind, started off behind the main building. So they actually broke a wall that was separating that particular facility from an adjoining warehouse belonging to another company.
When did they have to do this, or when did they have to deal with this problem of access? Was it yesterday or today?
It was today that I saw that particular one. So they actually broke it and they used the other outlets to get in there. So they were trying their very best to put out the fire until a point where we're told they had managed the situation, so it wasn't spreading to other aspects of the area. Even though they had managed, they were told it could reignite.
Yeah.
So the best thing was for them to get excavators to come so that it segregates the debris so that they'll be able to put out the fire completely. So they got in, NADMO and National Security came on board and actually brought in 2 excavators, and they came in, they were working with that. But the problem was they didn't have the necessary logistics, the necessary materials to help them fight the fire. Now with this I mean the nose masks, the protective clothing that they were supposed to wear, they didn't have them. They came in with some oxygen masks as well, about 30 of them or so, a little over 20, I think it was 28. That was the number I was given. And even with that one, it wasn't enough because the personnel on the ground were even more than 40.
Okay.
And for the 28 that was even brought, it actually ran out by 2 p.m. or so. They had run out. So there was a challenge. But they were still fighting. They were still in there, inhaling the smoke and everything. Some few minutes to, just some few minutes after 5, someone came and identified himself as a representative from the ministry. He had been mandated to actually to assess the situation and pass judgment on whether or not they should continue putting out the fire. I gathered the name as Dr. Sego. He came in with a government vehicle, a diplomatic vehicle actually, and when he came in, he spoke to the national security officials who were around, and we were told he didn't get into direct contact with the fire service personnel over there. He spoke to the national security operative who actually communicated the message to the national fire service to actually halt the process.
Okay.
They should halt it. And this is what actually worsened the situation, because when they halted it for some few minutes and the fire reignited. So as things stand now, the fire is still burning. It's actually gotten a bit bad. The situation is a bit bad as things stand now.
All right. Now, I'm also told that there were some recommendations that were made by some of the government officials who were at the place. What did they have to say?
Indeed, some persons came around, and with those persons, I'm referring to the Interior Minister, or Mr. Marco Woyongo. He was there, he visited the place, he was taking around the facility. He says that, well, he's been making some recommendations that it's high time we got some CCTV cameras installed in almost all these government facilities so that we'll be able to detect beforehand some of these things. And should these things happen, some of these footages will help us in our investigation. So that was what he's been saying, basically. Mr. Ileche, who is actually the chairman of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, was also there. He also went around the place. He's also been passing quite some interesting comments. He says we should take another look at the housing facilities that house very important things belonging to the state. So all these things, we do have them there on standby. Maybe we could just listen to probably Marco Woyongo, who has been talking about the CCTVs.
If we had put a few things in place, like if we had put some CCTV cameras, if we had fire service personnel here, if we had fire extinguishers here, and a few other things, I think that the damage could have been reduced.
You speak of CCTV. Does that in any way suggest that something foul could have happened?
For now, I can't rule out anything. I cannot rule out anything. I won't rule out sabotage, I won't rule out arson, I won't rule out anything. Yeah.
But the briefing you've received so far, could it in any way suggest arson?
Well, we're expecting the report maybe by Friday. I've spoken to the Chief Fire Officer and the police commander in charge of Tema District. I've asked them to come together and put up a comprehensive report by Friday. So I'm sure by Friday we'll get an interim report. It's a suggestion we are going to make to the various organizations, the Ministry of Health, ECG and the rest of them. They need to put these CCTVs so that at least that alone will scare away people who want to plan mischief. Besides, it will help us in our investigations when there are fires or there is theft or there is anything like that. So that's why it's very useful to have CCTV cameras installed at these sensitive places.
So it wouldn't be mandatory, it would be a recommendation?
It will be a recommendation, it will be a recommendation.
So various agencies to decide on whether or not they want to install them?
That's true, but we will impress upon them the need for them to put up these CCTV cameras.
Right, so that was a recommendation being made there about CCTV cameras. Apparently, you've also been making, you've also made some observations, interesting observations at the scene of the fire. Tell us about that.
Indeed, we did pick some information. We had some sources we were speaking to all throughout, and we picked some information that, in fact, some of the goods that were actually in the facility were expired goods. So it was quite interesting. So we decided to probe and find out whether indeed that was the case. And we went through and we actually found some of the things that had expired. Some in 2014, some in 2013, some as far back as 2008, like I was reporting early on. So early on, I did have some samples available, but they had expired in 2014. But as you can see now, we have some infusions and some other drugs. These are just a few we brought here. We weren't actually permitted to take some of them out, but these are the few where we managed to gather. And these are products that have been the expiry date was in 2008, so you can just imagine if these were the things we had in there and these were the things we were distributing to the
I can imagine that there will be some tangible explanation for, you know, the presence of these expired drugs at the warehouse. But what are the fire service officials telling you about when exactly they think they can completely bring this thing under control?
Well, had they continued at the pace they were operating at, they would have probably been able to manage the fire by now. But because there was that break, and because there was a reignition of some sort, the fire actually spread a bit. So as of the time I was leaving the scene, the fire had actually gotten to, let's say, a point where it's just about 50% managed as things stand now. So the situation is worse than it was. But even with this, they are still fighting it without the nose mask and the protective clothing. We are told they've had to defy the order from the National Security Operative and from the gentleman who came from the Ministry of Health. So in order to to put out the fire.
Okay, thank you very much, Kwabna Chenchahini Boateng. He's been at the scene of the fire, the Central Medical Stores, all day, and he's been bringing us the very latest. Now, it is estimated that more than 230 million Ghana cedis worth of medical supplies is what has been destroyed in Tuesday's fire at Ghana's foremost and largest medical supplies depot in Tema. The fire has been described as a major tragedy with implications for health delivery. Minister of Health, Kweku Agyeman-Mensah, however, says the impact on the distribution of supplies should not be so significant, especially as steps are being taken to replace what has been lost. He adds the various regional depots also have enough stock to last for 3 months.
The news conference followed a visit to the scene of the blaze by some ministers of state and government officials. The facility is used to focus the medicine and non-medicine commodity needs of the country to pursue supplies in a timely manner. It also monitored the usage of these supplies in order to minimize wastage in the process. The minister concedes the loss is huge but assured the situation is not completely out of control.
Estimated total cost of items destroyed by the fire outbreak is 237,798,707 Ghana cedis. The Central Medical Stores usually has 12 months stock levels generally held for each commodity nationally. 6 months stock held at the regional medical stores and 3 months stock at the service delivery point. This will not affect healthcare delivery in the hospitals because all regional medical stores have enough stock that can last for 2 to 3 months. Let me use this opportunity to allay fears of Ghanaians that this will not in any way affect drug supply. The Ministry of Health has informed the National Security to initiate a full-scale investigation into the fire outbreak. This investigation, together with the one being conducted by the Ghana National Fire Service, will inform us about what happened. Let me assure every Ghanaian that the ministry will follow this to the letter, and anybody found culpable, and this will be made to face the full rigors of the law.
The ministry has also begun placing orders for fresh consignments, while the minister has also directed all regional stores be insured as a matter of urgency.
The Ghana Medical Association says its members will in due course unilaterally declare themselves out of job over government's delay in furnishing them with the conditions of service. Assistant General Secretary Dr. Justice Tufu Yangson explains his colleagues are becoming increasingly frustrated by government's failure to conclude their conditions of service as essential service providers.
The conditions of service, he said, will properly spell out their terms of engagement, both financial and non-financial. He argues it will also improve the service delivery as well as make people accountable. The process of agreeing the conditions of service, he however says, has taken way too long.
Issues to do with our conditions of service have been on the table for 10 years now. It still hasn't been resolved. So if we agitate that, look, that document called conditions of service document should be finalized for us to know our way forward, I think it is just fair. How can you work without terms of reference? GMA, as we speak, we have issues with our pensions, convention difference and all that arising out of the single spine salary structure. These issues have been on the table for about 5 years now. Labour Commission has ruled. They failed to enforce their ruling. Government is also not implementing the rulings. At the end of the day, do you expect us to keep quiet? All we are asking for is that the various arrangements that have been in place for some years now that are not being implemented to the full or properly should be implemented. That is what we are saying.
He also accused the National Labour Commission for not acting in the interest of workers, stressing the NLC is also partly to blame for the labour agitation.
I, as a person or representing the Medical Association, we feel that they have basically failed us. They can give us the reasons, but for us, that is how we say it, because if you refuse to enforce your rulings, then more or less you are just beginning to deny your basic right of existence that you are a law enforcement or law adjudicating body. Any adjudicating body that cannot enforce its rulings, more or less, is to be one. But we are looking up to them to see what they will do this year. But what we are saying is that we will keep asking for these things, and this year we'll make sure that they are implemented. Else, we've given notice to the whole world. We are prepared to resign en bloc, give their jobs to the employer to do. You cannot force a man to work for you. That is the position of the Medical Association now. Either we get our conditions of service document signed, or we all consider ourselves not parts of the service. It's a simple thing.
He urged government to, as a matter of urgency, address the concerns raised. Matilda Pamaga for Joy News.
In another development, the Labour and Industrial Court hearing the case brought before it by 12 labour unions over the management of their Tier 2 pension contributions is adjourned to January 20, 2015. This was after the court could not sit on Wednesday, January 14, because the judge was not available.
The judge, Justice Said Kwekujana, at the last sitting gave 2 dates to hear the case, January 14 and 20th, due to official assignments that were going to keep him away. The 12 labour unions went on a joint strike and demonstration last year to demand that government and the National Pension Regulatory Authority transfer their second-tier pension contributions to a private manager of their choice. The strike was called off only after the unions were served an ex parte motion by the court. Though government assured the workers their contributions were safe with the Pension Alliance Trust, the 12 labour unions remain unconvinced and are praying the courts to grant them their wish.
This is the Primetime News Bulletin here on Joy News on Multi TV. We have more stories coming up after the break. Don't go away. The National Democratic Congress has refuted suggestions of the party's complicity in the recent cocaine bust involving Nayeli Amatafa. At a news conference to counter a previous one by the New Patriotic Party, NDC General Secretary Johnson Isidun Ketia rather accused the NPP of nurturing Nayeli's illicit business during their stay in office.
Nayeli Amatafa is currently serving a jail term for trafficking 12.5 kilograms of cocaine to the UK. Reports that she was aided through the VVIP launch of the Kotoka International Airport to transport her drugs, and false speculations that she had very powerful sponsors in high places in government. The conspiracy was somewhat confirmed by her lawyer in seeking a mitigation of her sentence, though the supposed highly placed sponsors were never named. The NPP at the early days of the scandal cited a visit by Ghana's High Commissioner to the UK, Victor Smith, to Nayeli, and conflicting pronouncements by persons linked to the NDC administration as proof that government knew about the lady's activities. But Johnson Isidun Ketia says those claims are unfounded.
Whether her description of top politicians was limited to top politicians in government or outside government, we wouldn't know. I must admit that if you say top politicians now in Ghana, it cannot be referring to NDC people alone, because clearly there are several flag bearers around, there are several high-profile members of parliament from both sides and so on. But I think that the circumstantial evidence should rather, the weight should be more on MPP than on NDC. And then those of you who are in government and are the toppers of politicians at that time, just get up and are trying to imply by some strange logic that by top politicians she means members of the NDC. And a stronger circumstantial evidence was that the MPP period was a period for the drug boom. And it was those days that top politicians were arrested and incarcerated. So is that not a stronger pointer to who the top politicians could be?
He stated the NDC government is the most committed to fighting the drug menace.
All the very punitive laws against narcotics were passed when NDC was in power. This can be cross-checked by any interested person. 2, NDC in government implemented these laws zealously by confiscated properties of all convicted drug barons. In fact, steps are already underway by NACOP to identify for confiscation all the property of Nayele acquired through the drug trade. No high-level NDC member has ever been implicated in this illicit trade. 4, no evidence of any official complicity of NDC in the drug trade.
Nayele Ametepe is serving an 8 years, 8 months sentence for her offense.
President John Dramani Mahama has called on feuding factions in Dagbon, the Abudus and Andanis, to work together as brothers to restore the dignity of the Dagbon Kingdom by taking active steps to pursue peace, reconciliation and unity. He said the Dagbon chieftaincy dispute is hampering the development of the area, hence the need to find a permanent solution to the problem. President Mahama said this when he joined the people of Dagbon at the Bewa Palace in Yendi in the northern region to mark this year's Damba Festival.
This year's Damba Festival brought together both the Abudus and Andanis at the Bewa Palace. The festival was on the theme, taking inspiration from our common heritage and culture in the struggle for peace and development. The annual festival, apart from celebrating the birth of Prophet Muhammad, also unites the people from all over the country to thank God for the successful harvest season and offer an opportunity for the people to deliberate on development in the area. It also creates a platform for reunification talks among the various divisions to rebuild the broken parts that resulted from chieftaincy disputes in the past years. The festival also creates the opportunity for the people of Dagbon to showcase their rich traditional heritage. President John Dramani Mahama, who was the special guest of honor for the ceremony, announced that the Otumfuo-led 3 eminent chiefs mediation committee will resume peace talks this month on the Dagbon chieftaincy divide and called on both the Abudus and Andanis to work together to restore the dignity of the Dagbon Kingdom.
I wish to commend the members of both families, Abudus and Andanis, very highly for this show of maturity, unity and understanding. It is my hope and prayer that this show of understanding would be sustained in the coming years for all of us to recognize that we truly have a common heritage and culture and that we are one and the same people with a common destiny. I wish to assure you that government will play its part to continue to support the effort to bring about lasting peace in Dagbon. I spoke to the Otumfuo Nana Osei Asare, the second yesterday, and he has intimated me of his intention to invite the families of Dagbon this month to Kumasi to conclude the work of the eminent committee in resolving the outstanding traditional and customary issues involved in the Dagbon chieftaincy affair.
The Royal Regent of Dagbon, Kampakuyana Abdullahi Yakubu Andani, in a speech read on his behalf by the Registrar of the Dagbon Traditional Council, Adam Gariba, reminded government of its pledge to find the perpetrators of the murder of the overlord of Dagbon and Nanum, as well as Bembela. He said government's continuous silence in finding the murderers of the 2 eminent chiefs in Dagbon and Nanun remain a threat to national security.
That beyond the blatant impunity, the perpetrators, that the state and the laws of Ghana are unable to or have refused since to recognize as such, continue to make noises in the belief that they will, through manipulation of the state machinery and legal or judicial subterfuge, eventually derive benefit from their crime. The vast majority of the people of Ghana, Dagbon in particular, will find it most unfair that any person should be allowed to benefit from a crime willfully planned and executed.
President Mahama was later skinned with a chieftaincy title, Zo Maliguna, literally meaning peace broker, by the Dagbon regent.
The Africa Center for Energy Policy has joined calls for government to refrain from implementing a mitigation levy on petroleum products. While they contend the levy will be burdensome for Ghanaians, its proceeds may not be properly accounted for, as has happened in the past.
Hints of a possible introduction of a mitigation levy on petroleum products got the civil society organizations such as ISODEC raising protestations. Government says such a levy will help stabilize fuel prices locally when global oil prices soar in the future. But the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ASAP, says that is not the way out.
We shouldn't impose further burden on consumers, because the fact of the matter is that you cannot, as I said, control prices from Ghana, and for that matter, you can't even save so much to be able to offset future rise in price. Assuming prices go back to $100, you cannot have, say, 10 billion Ghana cedis sitting in an account to be able to close that margin. So we just have to allow the market to dictate the prices and allow consumers to enjoy when prices come down. As we speak, there is BOST levy, there is TOR debt recovery levy, there is exploration levy. You and I do not know how those funds are utilized. Proper accounting is lacking in all of these levies, and we are going to add another one to it. So the net effect is that you are giving another window for political mismanagement.
Although Ghana is an oil exporter and is feeling the squeeze due to the current situation, Asa believes the country is better off in a regime of falling oil prices.
The fact is that when prices are falling, you actually enhance the amount of money left with citizens, which they can invest. So they have the opportunity to buy product cheaply or cheaper and make some savings that they can invest into their businesses. At the same time, government can capture more revenue through taxation and be able to offset whatever damage a drop in prices would have caused to exports. So in Ghana's situation, I think is positive.
The center is meanwhile reiterating its calls for government to be more transparent with transactions in the entire oil and gas sector.
Now, about 300 children suffering from a holding heart condition are awaiting treatment at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. 4-year-old Rayan just joined the list. He needs $6,000 to undergo the surgery.
The tears of a mother afraid her son will die. It took 4 years after getting married for Zelia to finally have a successful pregnancy. In the 4 years after, her son Ryan has been her pride and joy.
Anytime I look at the child, I don't know where the tears is coming from, so I can't even control myself.
It all starts with a cough.
Anytime he's just coughing, you see that he will feeling so weak. That's how it started, and finally he can't speak. 1 month now, hasn't been in school.
Zelia cannot stand the thought of losing her only child.
People to help us to save our child life. I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm also losing. I don't know what to say.
4-year-old Ryan is begging for $6,000 to help him stay alive. To save Ryan, kindly donate any amount to Multimedia Group Limited, Barclays Bank Circle Branch, account number 041-201-8095, account number 041-201-8095.
Right, so $6,000 is just about 20,000 cedis. Help if you can. Business is next.
Business News is brought to you.
Hello, it's time now for Business with me, Matilda Nyakwa Dennis. We start with inflation, which for December 2014 remained unchanged from the 17% recorded the previous month, even though the monthly rate change in December 2014 was just 1% as compared to 0.9% recorded for November. It did not affect the overall inflation rate.
The year-on-year inflation rate for December 2014 was 17.0%. This means that the change in the general price level was 17.0% over the one-year period, December 2013 to December 2014. The year-on-year inflation rate for November 2014 was also 17.0%. Now, the monthly change rate for December 2014 was 1.0%. This means that the change in the general price level went up by 1.0% between November and December 2014.
According to Deputy Government Statistician Barima Osei, the year-on-year non-food inflation rate for December 2014 was 23.9% compared to 24.1% recorded for November 2014, with housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels altogether accounting for the main reason for the figure. The year-on-year food inflation rate, however, saw a 0.2 percentage points increase from 6.6% in November 2014 to 6.8% in December 2014.
Now, the graph depicts that generally the non-food inflation rate has remained higher than the food inflation rate over the period December 2013 to the period December 2014. And for December 2014, we realized that the non-food inflation rate is more than 3.5 times higher than the food inflation rate.
The northern region recorded the highest regional year-on-year inflation rate of 19.0%, while the upper west region recorded the lowest. The November and December inflation rates of 17.0% is the highest since March 2010.
Meanwhile, the Ghanaian economy grew by 5.1% between July and September last year. The figure represents significant growth compared to the 1.0% seen over the same period in 2013. Deputy Government Statistician Barima Osei explains the agricultural sector's growth of 8.1%, the highest among the sectors, played a key role.
This means the value of goods and services produced in the third quarter of 2014 grew by 1.4% compared to the second quarter of 2014. The comparable growth for the second quarter of 2014 was 0.2%.
The most notable performances of the quarter-on-quarter seasonally adjusted growth rates were financial and insurance activities, fishing, information and communication activities.
And the quarterly year-on-year growth rate for the third quarter of 2014 was 5.1%. This implies that compared to the third quarter of 2013, the value of goods and services produced in the third quarter of 2014 increased by 5.1%.
Still in business, the Private Enterprise Federation says the cedi will remain stable, inflation will come down, liquidity will increase, and ultimately GDP will grow if only Ghana diversifies its exports. Director General of PEF, Barima Osei Asare, insists there is the need for more value to be added to the raw materials exported in order to earn more.
Ghana's trade deficit currently stands at $20 billion, according to the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Analysts say the figure is huge and are pushing for an improvement in the deficit. For the private sector, this can be achieved if the export trade is diversified from traditional exports to non-traditional exports, such as pharmaceuticals, to help assuage the country's current challenges.
Instead of exporting your raw materials, if you add value, there's additional processes that go through that come on board, and that additional create jobs. And when you add value, you also command higher pricing than the raw materials that have been our backbone of exports. And if we need to have $10 to be able to export $10 worth, we are possibly at $2 now, about 20% or whatever. So we need to increase because we keep importing. Unless we can become self-sufficient in production and the patronage of Ghanaian-made goods, we're still going to rely on the foreign imports. So we have to counterbalance that with the exports that we do. And that's why there's a need for diversification to broaden our base to be able to export some more.
PEF was also clear the diversification dream will never be realized if the energy sector crisis is not dealt with in the shortest term.
A lot more emphasis in the provision of the things that would allow us to increase production to be able to facilitate export trading. I don't see much in the budget. There's prediction of especially the power outages and all. Unless we address that big animal, we're not going to be able to do much. And so there must be emphasis, even though we have the Compact 2 that is going to creep in gradually, there must be the talk of bringing other power producers and all. But for the short term, what do we have in place? And if we don't put short-term measures in place to boost production that can scale up into merchandise into the export market, then we'll be chasing shadows in the long run.
In a bid to create a platform to share ideas on improving the situation, the Africa Business Media, in collaboration with BEF, has therefore launched the Economic Outlook and Business Strategy Conference 2015. The forum is to afford government, its agencies and other stakeholders an opportunity to examine the export industry, opportunities in the sector, share ideas and find solutions to gain immensely from the global export trade.
Well, that's all for business with me, Matilda Nyakwa Kweku. Up next is sports.
Business News was brought.
Time for sports, and we begin sports with a rather disturbing story. The Accra Sports Stadium has over the years been the home grounds for quite a number of football teams based here in the capital, especially Hartlepool and Great Olympics. On Sunday, January 18, the 2014-2015 Ghana Premier League will kick off. And as usual, these two clubs are expected to use the Accra Sports Stadium as their home venue. But how ready is the stadium for the task ahead? Here's a report by Joy Sports' Babatando.
The Accra Sports Stadium was opened in the 60s and underwent refurbishment in 2007 ahead of Ghana's hosting of CAN 2008. Since then, no major maintenance has been done on the edifice. The 40,000-seater stadium is under the management of the National Sports Authority. The pitch, however, is under the care of Green Grass Technology. According to them, the pitch is in the current semi-deteriorated state due to some events held last December. This is the pitch of the Accra Sports Stadium, which will be hosting some Premier League teams in this season's edition of the First Capital Plus Premier League. Now, if you look on the pitch very well, you see it's fairly green, but with a lot of brown patches here and there. And as I step onto the grass very well, you see that it's quite hard. I'm not a technical person, and so I'll be speaking to some technical people to find out if indeed the pitch is really okay for the commencement of the 2014-2015 First Capital Plus Premier League and other matches. An England-based physiotherapist currently on practical attachment at Accra Hartlepool, Steve Cutler, tells Joy Sports the pitch is not quite ready for the commencement of this season's league.
I think it needs flattening first. I think maybe little divots need filling in, and then clearing. All the sort of the sharp objects need clearing.
Steve Cutler outlines the likely side effects players will suffer should they play on the pitch in its current state.
Cuts, things like that, you fall on something sharp. You know, they're maybe not likely, but it's possible.
Officials of the National Sports Authority have issued a directive to Greengrass Technology to improve the state of the pitch by January 21. But the pitch management company says due to the severity of this year's harmattan, it will be difficult to put the pitch in shape for the start of the 2014-2015 Ghana Premier League.
Still on football, we get ourselves ready for the African Cup of Nations. Before that, though, ex-Black Stars captain Stephen Appiah has announced his retirement from active football after a career that spanned over 2 decades. The former Hearts of Oak, Juventus and Fenerbahce midfielder, in a statement released on Wednesday, described time as Black Stars player as the most gratifying.
Stephen Appiah, the Ghana captain, with the opportunity to put his side back in front. First half stoppage time. Ghana are in control again.
That goal by Stephen Appiah sent Ghana through to the second stage of the 2006 World Cup in Germany. After a career spanned 2 decades, the former Black Stars captain will no longer play active football for the rest of his life. In a statement from the former Juventus star, he wished this day never came because football was life, his life which made him whole. His career had several highlights, from the modest beginnings at Accra Hearts of Oak to the glamour of the likes of Juventus and Fenerbahce. Appiah's commitment opened a great door of opportunity for him after he was selected to play in the 1995 Under-17 FIFA World Cup, which the Black Starlets won. Stephen Appiah brought respect to the Black Stars after he was named captain of the team and has since left the legacy of inspirational leadership. He redefined service to the senior national team. Stephen Appiah is undoubtedly one of the biggest individual football stories of his generation and remains a great example for generations to come.
And there's a quest to find some more tornadoes at the next Africa Cup of Nations. We continue our special build-up to the 2015 Africa Cup of Nations, and we turn our focus to Group B, which is made up of Tunisia, Zambia, DR Congo and Cape Verde. That's your sports. I'm George Adi Jr. Israel, join us with some more. Have a good night.
Controversial hip live artist Kwao Kese has confessed that being locked up in prison custody for some days made him realize that freedom is the most expensive commodity in the world. He has therefore advised his fans to hold dear their freedom and not abuse.